What is up, everybody? I am here to film my May wrap up, actually closer to the beginning of June than is normal for my wrap ups. If you've noticed the last couple, they've usually come, well past everyone else's normal wrap up time. But your girl's busy and I keep forgetting to film, but I keep wanting to film. It's a whole like paradoxical sort of situation here. I want to film, I forget to film. I want to film, I forget to film. So anyway, I read a fuck ton of books in May because this whole working as a bookseller thing really just means that I just spend my entire life reading right now. So yeah, I'll try not make this too long, but yeah, here are all the books I read last month. Started off with Murray Hall by Milo Allen. Now this was a book that my shop was supposed to be doing like a event with and stuff before she got cancelled last minute. So I kind of read this for nothing, but it was a really, really interesting book. I would say, if you don't know who Murray Hall is, he was a very sort of, not prominent, but, a respected member of New York society. He was a Scottish man, and he was sort of a politician in New York and things, and, he sort of rubbed up a few people the wrong way and stuff. But he was just kind of like, oh, he's a politician, isn't he? But then after he died, it was revealed that he was actually a transgender man, and this sort of basically threw his entire life into question, his relationships with other people into question, and this book takes place after his death when this is revealed, and you're basically following the journalist who is then trying to piece together who Murray Hall might have been before he came to America. So he's following stories of these men in Scotland who he thinks might have been Murray Hall and things, and seeing what happened to them, and just trying his best to piece together the life Murray Hall had before he became the figure that this journalist knew in New York. Absolutely fascinating character in history. This book really, really made me want to dig deeper into the actual person who was Murray Hall. Like, as if this is based on a real person, like Murray Hall was a real person. He really was a transgender man. A lot of this stuff is based in historical fact. But one of the interesting things I found about this book was the fact that it's basically got this whole story of we'll never really know. Was he just a woman pretending to be a man because that was better for her in society and sort of things like that? That way she was able to vote, that way she was able to, basically have her own independence, or was he actually a trans man just, living as a man because that's who he was? And constantly you are seeing this kind of like be discussed, and eventually, and it is always just down to he is dead, his wife is dead, we will never really know. That was his story to tell. This was revealed after his death. It's really, really fascinating. I did find the pacing to be like a little bit off. Like I found at times, like I did struggle to kind of get through it towards the end. Because, you're kind of following this journalist, and then he's constantly sort of being told all these stories around the Murray Hall character. And sometimes the stories would feel like a little bit exposition-y, a little bit like, okay, and now we're going to this person, they're going to tell him this anecdote about Murray Hall, and we're going to go to this person, he's going to tell him this anecdote about Murray Hall. So like the pacing and the sort of structuring was a little bit off for me, but overall it was a really, really fantastic book. It was very different from a lot of the stuff I tend to read, and the fact that it was actually based, he was a Scottish man, and it was like, this was based on real stuff in history. Like I said, it makes me really interested to actually go and look into Murray Hall a little bit more, because it was really, really interesting. Highly recommend this. It's Pride Month right now in June, so if you're looking for a little bit more of an interesting read, I would highly recommend Murray Hall. I then read Pagans by James Alastair Henry. My god, this book was good. This is literally like, this book has got one foot in the crime genre and the other foot in the sci-fi fantasy genre. Like, this was so well done. It's basically set in a world where the Norman conquest never happened, so it's modern day, but instead of England, you kind of have like the Anglo-Saxon culture. Instead of Wales, you have the Celtic culture. Instead of Scotland is now part of like the Nordic sort of unification and stuff. It is really, really cool. If you've ever been like one of those people that's like, I wonder what life would look like if, we hadn't been invaded and stuff, if this part of culture had lived on until modern life and stuff, this is the book for you, because it's done in such an interesting way, from just the world building and the cultures and stuff to the politics and the interpolitics between like the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons and the Picts and the Pan-Africans and stuff like that. Like, it's really, really cool, and it's not just localized to the UK. Like, the author speaks widely about the First Nations in America and stuff. It is all imagined as if the entire world's older heritages have survived until modern day and are still like, you know, the cultures and stuff that these countries live by. Really, really fascinating. It's murder mystery. There's a Celtic sort of politician or, you know, important man in Celtic culture who is murdered, and a Anglo-Saxon detective inspector and a Celtic detective inspector have to work together to solve the murder and stuff. And they basically go on this whole thing of, like, you know, seeing how it's all connected to all the different cultures. Brilliant, brilliant book. I would love to see this as a TV show. I think it would be such a good cop drama, but with the world building and stuff. Like, just such a cool, like, concept and executed perfectly. Like I said, I could sell this as either fantasy or crime, because I think it would appeal to both sets of readers, maybe a little bit more fantasy than the crime readers, but honestly, like, the way this is written and the way, like, oh my god, I don't even know how to say this. This is such a good book. Also, look at the pretty edges that I got in my copy. Yeah, highly recommend this if it's not on your radar. It should be. I then read The Sunken Archive duology, so this was a reread of A Letter to the Luminous Deep and then a read of A Letter from the Lonesome Shore. If you don't know, Letter to the Luminous Deep was one of my favourite books from last year. I absolutely adored this, and I was highly, highly anticipating the sequel. It is just a duology, so this is the complete story. So if you're one of those people that don't like to pick things up until you know the ending's out there, you can absolutely pick this one up. Letter to the Luminous Deep is an epistolary novel, so if you don't know what that is where it is told entirely through letters, and you're basically following these various characters in two different sort of types of time. So you're following E and Henry, who form a sort of pen pal friendship, and then a year after their disappearances, you are following E's sister Sophie and Henry's brother Viren, as they kind of get in contact with each other after finding the letters that formed their brother and Viren's brother and Sophie's sister's friendship and romance. And they start to kind of piece together what was going on in their siblings' lives in the lead up to their disappearance, and very quickly find out that there was a lot more to their disappearance than they originally thought. Brilliant, brilliant book. It's sort of like cozy academia, but in like a sort of underwatery sort of society, or like, you know, it's sort of set in this world where there's just the ocean and things, and there used to be the floating islands and stuff, but those got sunk in like a sort of like cataclysm that their ancestors caused for unknown reasons. So E and Sophie and their brother Arvist have been raised in this house called the Deep House, which is like one of the few, very, very few houses that are completely underwater and stuff. And then the rest of society lives in sort of scholarly circles in like boats and some bits of land, but mostly just on like sort of like, you know, connected flotillas basically on the surface and things like that. So the communication is between E in the Deep House and Henry on the surface, usually doing his academic studies and things like that. And then also Viren and Sophie, usually on the surface, but then Sophie is also off doing a expedition in the depths of the ocean at times, so she's also like quite deep underwater and stuff. So much cool imagery and description and stuff, especially of like sort of the underwater and the world and like the creatures and stuff, and how being deep under the ocean sort of affects your senses and stuff. And generally just brilliant, brilliant characters. The format is so unique and interesting, obviously being told entirely through letters that E and Henry have sent each other, and letters that Sophie and Viren are then exchanging, and then letters that Henry and Viren exchanged before Henry disappeared, and letters that Sophie and E sent to each other. All really, really cool stuff that then piece together this narrative that you are seeing. This is a completely queer normative world as well. Sophie has a wife, Viren has a husband, and it's hinted at in the first book, but then I will say confirmed in the second book, but that both E and Henry are asexual. And I really, really love how that's handled in this world. I think this is some of the best asexual romantic representation that I have ever seen. So obviously that gives it a big win from me. It's just so cute as well. Like, I'm not big into romantasy, but this is what I would say is romantasy. It is about the romance between E and Henry, but it's so wholesome and it's so sweet, and their romance and stuff just makes me want to kick my feet and be like, just such a good idea. I mean, the second book as well, it didn't go in the way I thought it was going to. Like, it was definitely a very different story by the end than it had been in the first, but like in a good way. It was very surprising. It was very interesting. I did find the way that it was resolved to be just very on point with the theming and the ideas and stuff, and yeah, just brilliant. If you like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, if you like A Natural History of Dragons, you will like A Letter to the Luminous Deep. I I then read The Screaming Staircase by Jonathan Stroud. This is one I borrowed from the library, so I've obviously handed my copy back. I don't have it to wave around enthusiastically. This is the first in the Lockwood & Co series. I watched the Lockwood & Co series on Netflix. There was an adaptation of just one season before Netflix obviously cancelled it, because that's what Netflix does. And it adapted the first 2 books into one season, and I was devastated when it got cancelled. So I've been meaning to read the books basically ever since to try and, to see the rest of the story. My God, was that a good adaptation, because reading the books, I feel like I'm just back in there. Like, they really got just the tone and the characterization of those characters right in that adaptation. And The Screaming Staircase is really brilliant. If you don't know the concept of Lockwood & Co, it's basically set in a world where sort of 50 years ago, ghosts started appearing all across Britain and stuff like that, and only people sort of 18 and under could really see them through different ways. You could either have people who can see them, people who can hear them, and people who are able to touch things that have something to do with the ghosts, and it gives them a better sense of what's going on with them. And many agents will have different combinations of all 3. Perhaps, one person will be better at their listening, but they'll still have some sight and some touch and things like that. And you're following a bit of a ragtag agency of Anthony Lockwood, Lucy Carlyle, and George. In the book, he's George Cubbins. In the show, he is George Kareem, who are one of the few independent agencies that hire out their services to deal with ghosts. And one of the things that makes them different is the fact that there are no adult supervisors around. They are entirely independent, just the 3 of them, kind of, teenagers, basically just kicking ass and taking names. Really great series on Netflix. Even though it does only have 1 season, I would recommend you watch it. But also read the books, because the series is fantastic. As of right now, I have read, I'm on the last book in the series because I am just binging it in all one go, but I'll talk about it all in the next wrap up when I've gotten through all of them. But The Screaming Staircase is really great. You see Lockwood & Co finding themselves in sort of financial difficulties. You get a little bit of backstory as to how our sort of narrator, Lucy Carlyle, came to be with Lockwood and George. And then you see as they kind of, in order to save face from some problems they've caused themselves, they go and basically try and deal with one of the worst haunted houses in London for a rather shit ton amount of money to pay off some financial debts they have. Such a great concept, such great characters, brilliant writing. Yeah, I loved this book. I did know obviously what was going to happen, because we haven't seen it on the show and stuff, but yeah, I will talk a little bit more about it in my next wrap-up video when I talk about the whole series, because, oh my God. And then read The Silence Factory by Bridget Collins. Bridget Collins is one of my all-time favourite authors because she wrote The Binding and The Betrayals, and those are 2 of my favourite books. And The Silence Factory follows this man who, after the loss of his wife and child, is basically just trying to hold it together. He's working for his father-in-law as an aurist, so basically someone in sort of like Victorian era times who basically helps, basically has like sort of like hearing aids and stuff like that. And he gets hired by this man who creates silk that basically causes silence. You place a piece of this silk over your ear and you will not hear anything on the other side of that cloth. Our main character gets hired basically to be like, a spokesperson for this cloth to try and get it into the market and stuff, because he kind of falls in love with this cloth and things like that, and just thinks it's the best thing ever. So the man who makes it sees this and is like, oh, I can use this guy's enthusiasm to try and sell this. So like, and everything kind of goes from there. If you've read any Bridget Collins, you'll know it's about like, it's always sort of slightly spooky. It's, always very questionable characters, very questionable relationships and stuff. Quite often, you've got quite a naive main character who doesn't quite understand the abuse they're suffering and things like that. So it's quite a difficult read. I would say I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed The Binding or The Betrayals. I do feel like I really, really wanted there to be more of this one character who is the daughter of the man who makes the silk. I can't remember any of their names and I can't be bothered to look up right now, so we are just going to be super vague right now. Who is deaf, and well, part of the reason why this our main character ends up going there is because he's actually being sent out as a consultant to try and find a hearing aid that will work for her. And like, it is just, I think there's just a complete missed opportunity there between our main character and this young girl to really form a bond. It's hinted at, but we never actually see it. And then it's kind of brought up later in the book as this really important thing. And it's like, they've barely shared any scenes together. Like, could we just have a little bit more of that? I really feel like that should have been the focus of the book. So that's what really let this one down for me. Overall, really interesting read. Very different, very, like I said, it's sort of magical, but not quite, but spooky and things like that. You've got another point of view of a woman in the past who first discovers the silk that makes this silence cotton and things like that. The silence silk, and you know, that's quite interesting to sort of see her perspective of things and then following our main character in his time and things. So yeah, so I had lots of really interesting elements, but overall it was just lacking, I think, just sort of a heart to the story. I then read A Fate Inked in Blood. This is a beautiful copy that I have of this book. This is the Fairy Loot edition. So I had really high hopes for this. I'd heard loads of good things about this. There's a curse carved in bone has just been released. So I thought, okay, I've seen a lot of people talking about this. Lots of people coming in looking for this second book. Let's find out what the fuss is about. Now, unfortunately, it is a romantasy, and like I said earlier, I don't usually read romantasy quite often because it is basically copy-paste the exact same thing, just put it in a different world with some different characters, but the core elements are there. Unfortunately, that was the case here. Really cool world building. It's all Norse gods and children of Norse gods, and you know, the Viking kind of culture and things like that, and old Nordic cultures. Really, really fascinating, really, really cool ideas, really like cool ideas with the magic. I did like our main character. She's, you know, brave and independent and feisty and things like that, and I really, really liked her. Could not give less of a shit about the love interest, could not give less of a shit about their romance. Just, it was just doing the same old shit that I have seen time and time and time again, with, you know, not even good sex scenes thrown in there. Like, it's just kind of like, oh my god. The plot was interesting enough to keep me busy, but like I said, this main male love interest was just dull as shit, and you're supposed to think he's all hot and sexy, and I'm just like, oh, get this out of my face. So yeah, I won't be continuing with the series. I'm really sad because, like I said, this is a fucking gorgeous cover that I have, but I have seen this done so many times before. This is why I don't like romantasy on principle. There are the occasional ones. Lectures of Luminous Deep is romantasy. I liked that. I even enjoyed the Hurricane Wars when I read it. Hated the Monsoon Rising. Loved the Hurricane Wars. So, like, you know, occasionally I will find things in romantasy that are really interesting. It's an author doing a completely different take on something I have seen before, and that's always quite interesting to see. This was not that. Oh, but you want to talk about a book I got excited about? You want to talk about a book I got excited? I got a proof copy of The Executioners 3. In case you can't tell, I fucking love Susan Dennard. I have all of her books. I have, well, at least the ones that are still in print. I can't get a hold of Something Strange and Deadly anymore, which is very sad. But I have the hardcover and the paperbacks of her Truth Witch series. I have all of the nice editions of the Luminaries. And now I have a proof of The Executioners 3. This isn't out until August and I've read it already. And I'm so happy about that. This is set in the 90s. It is about this girl who, basically in the sort of lead up to kind of like their town's like Halloween sort of events and stuff, you know, spooky shit starts going on. And because she has like this insane instinct to sort of like know when something fishy's going on, she kind of gets drawn into investigating it and trying to work out what happens, whilst also kind of being let in on like the sort of like the cool crowd at school, because basically her sort of public school has a rivalry with the nearby private school, and they have all these pranks and stuff that date back like 50 years and stuff like that. And the current prank squad decide that our main character Freddie and her friend get to be in because Freddie accidentally gets a lot of people from the rival school arrested one night, which is not a spoiler. That's like happens in the first chapter. It's like the first line. And that's kind of what kickstarts her into basically just seeing her life at school change and things like that. And her path crosses with some very interesting characters from the other school, in particular Theo, who is just a very, very interesting little guy. And slowly she is drawn into this sort of conspiracy and just mystery of the Executioners 3 and what's happening in her town, going, you know, dating back hundreds of years to when people first settled there and stuff, and she's trying to work out what's going to happen and stop what's going to happen before it happens again. Brilliant book. Obviously I can't say too much about it because like obviously this is like a super early copy and things, but oh my god, it was good. If you read The Luminaries by Susan Dennard, this has really similar vibes of like the kind of small town dynamics and things like that. The romance in this was so good because like I feel like I need to, especially after shitting on A Fate Inked in Blood, I love a good romance. Susan Dennard writes a good romance. I could not put this down because I was so obsessed with how good the romance in this is, because you just are rooting for them. Also, she writes good kissing scenes. My god, this woman just knows how to write those. Just, oh, it was so good. And like, you know, the romance was part of what made me want to keep reading this book. Yeah, the plot was great and the spooky vibes were there. But Theo and Freddie, bro. living in my head rent-free. Yeah, this book is out in August. You should all read it. I then read Damned by Genevieve Cogman. Another one of my favourite authors because she just writes very fun, easy to read, palate cleanser books. You know, if you've been reading, say, Falcon Stormlight Archive and you're just like, ugh, I just need something easy and fun to read, anything that Genevieve Cogman writes is what you want. She wrote the Invisible Library series, which is basically like that one episode of Doctor Who, but make it an entire series. Damned is the third in her vampire French Revolution trilogy, which is basically the concept of the French Revolution, but also there are vampires in this world. Woo! And you're following a maid, Eleanor, who basically gets loaned out from her vampire mistress to this other rich couple who are humans, because she happens to look identical to Marie Antoinette. And the rich couple she's kind of getting loaned out to happen to be the leaders of the League of the Scarlet Pimpernel, who are this group of people who are basically getting people out of France before they're all executed and things like that. Whether they be noble, whether they be poor, whether they be aristocratic vampires and stuff, they're just there to try and help and get people out whilst France is going through this incredibly bloody time in its history. And everything kind of goes from there. It's like fun spies, but also fun magic and interesting world building. Such a dumb concept of just, yes, the French Revolution, but also with vampires. Like, it's so dumb, but I love it. And this was the third book, so I can't want to say too much about it, but you know, the stakes have really been raised, and Eleanor has grown so much as a character. I would say the only thing about this series is like all the characters are really, really flat except for our main character and like there's one other side character. I spent most of the first book not realising the love interest was supposed to be the love interest, because I was like, oh, is he supposed to, okay, like, because yeah, it just kind of wasn't there. But a fun read, such incredible world building, so creative, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was really fun. Finally, I read A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This is this month's fantasy book of the month, and I liked it. It was so good. It was my first T. Kingfisher. It's a retelling of The Goose Girl, but I'm not familiar enough with that fairy tale to really give any commentary on that. But basically, you're following this girl Cordelia, whose mother is a sorceress, and they've kind of been living life with her mother, basically ensorcering men to basically take her on as a mistress and stuff, and, you know, give her money and things like that. And when this most recent sort of, you know, arrangement falls through, she then goes to try and find another one, but this time she's decided, I need to get him to marry me so that I can't just be cast away. But obviously to do that, he actually needs to fall in love with her, because the minute they get to the altar with the sort of wine and the salt and things like that, any enchantment she would have had over him would break and he'd see through it. So in order to get him to marry her, she needs him to actually fall in love with her. So she drags Cordelia, her daughter, to this man's house after he sort of, you know, encourages to come and stay there, which is also where we meet this man's sister Hester, who is our other point of view in the story. And she knows from the get-go that something is wrong with this woman. You know, she wakes up one day with this sense of doom in her heart, and this is doom that she calls this woman for the entirety of the book. And basically she just starts to, she's trying to prove that something's going on, but she also finds herself then trying to save Cordelia and things like that, because she realizes that this young girl is completely, you know, her life is basically based on her mother's whims, and she is, you know, she's tired and abused and tiny and just needs a friend. It is such a good book. It was a really, really interesting cast of characters. It was cozy, but also tense, but also horror elements, but fantastical and things like that. Like a really, really interesting blend of genres, which I believe is very typical for T. Kingfisher. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I thought all the characters were brilliant. I thought the character of Cordelia was fantastic. You know, I feel like often with young children characters, there, you know, there's often the sort of worry that they're going to be quite whiny and quite annoying. Cordelia is not that. You completely understand why she is the way she is. She has a lot of redeeming qualities to her and stuff, and she just, you know, she goes on such a fantastic character journey in this. And her relationship with Hester is lovely. Hester as well goes on a great character journey in this. Basically it was like learning to trust yourself and learning to, you know, basically just stand up and, you know, shout at the world and things like that. Like, oh, just, I really, really enjoyed this book. And yeah, like I said, a really interesting cast of characters, because we have some like Hester's friends that turn up and stuff, and they all take Cordelia under their wings and stuff like that. And like, oh, yeah, it's good. It's a really, really good book. Okay, that is everything that I read in the month of May. Like I said, that has been a fuck ton of books for me. That's like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books. Which for me is a lot. I think I did DNF a book, but I think I'm gonna leave all my DNFs for the end of the year as like a sort of wrap up and things. So that can be a fun video for people to look forward to, is to, you know, basically slating all these ridiculously boring books that I have read. Because I don't DNF that often, but I have had to start to. Especially with the books that they want me to read for work sometimes and things, I'll be like, oh, that sounds interesting, and then I'll start reading it. I'm like, this is the most boring thing I have ever read in my entire life. Why was it published? So you have that to look forward to. Have you read any of the books that I have mentioned today? What did you read in May? Please do let me know by commenting down below. And yeah, I will see you next month, perhaps before then, if I write any reviews and film, remember to film them.